Hi, my name is Callen. And this isn't a story about losing a wedding invitation. It's about realizing I was never meant to be part of the picture to begin with. My family cropped me out, of photos, of speeches, of memories they still share over dinner tables I no longer sit at. But here's what no one tells you. Sometimes the silence isn't a mistake. It's a strategy. They thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd keep funding the legacy they were rewriting without me. But what happens when the invisible one starts pulling the strings? Would you stay silent, too? The coffee was still warm when the call came in. I just poured it into the mug my father gave me years ago, a simple ceramic thing with a chipped rim and faded navy glaze. I cradled it in both hands, watching the early spring light fall across the floor of my home office. The blinds cast long, tired stripes across the cluttered desk. Bills I'd meant to file, a half-read book, a stack of documents from Vexlitech, all untouched. It was one of those afternoons where everything was too quiet, and even the birds outside seemed hesitant to interrupt. My phone vibrated against the edge of the desk, its hum cutting through the stillness. I glanced at the screen. Dad. Just that. No emojis, no preview, just his name, stark and unblinking. I hesitated, then answered. Callen, he said. His voice was calm, clipped, as though he'd practiced this in his head before dialing. I wanted to talk to you about the wedding. I felt my spine stiffen. All right. There's been some discussion, he continued. Elira's parents, well, they're a bit particular about the image they want to present. And Callen, he agrees. I didn't say anything. They've decided it's best if you don't attend. It's nothing personal, son. They just feel... I cut in. They feel I'm not what? A good look for the guest list? There was silence on the line, but not the kind that begged for understanding. It was final. Decided. It's complicated, he said at last, but this is Callen's day. Let's not make waves. Before I could respond, he ended the call. I sat there for a moment, the phone still against my ear, long after the line had gone dead. The mug in my hand suddenly felt heavier, like it was dragging my arm down. I set it aside and opened my laptop, more out of habit than purpose. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved almost on their own. The wedding website was polished, filled with pastel colors and scripted fonts. Photos of Callen and Elira smiling in golden light. An itinerary for the big day, a digital RSVP button, a guest list. I clicked. There it was, a spreadsheet of names, table numbers, meal preferences. My name was there, but not as a guest. It had a tag next to it. Avoid. Potential conflict. I stared at that line for longer than I should have. Read it, reread it, let it soak into my skin like vinegar on a wound. They didn't want me there, not just as an afterthought. They had planned for me to be absent. I leaned back in my chair, letting the full weight of it hit. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was a decision. Coordinated, deliberate, cruel in its politeness. It reminded me of high school, when Callen got into trouble for crashing Dad's car and I covered for him. Or when Elira's boutique almost folded, and I slipped her a check without anyone knowing. I'd played the background role so long, I didn't realize the stage had been rearranged without me. And now I was being asked not to show up, to stay hidden for the sake of appearances. I glanced over at the mug again, still resting where I'd left it. The crack in the rim caught the sunlight. It hadn't been there yesterday. Funny how something can break while still holding everything in place. I picked it up, held it steady between my hands. For a second, I thought about dropping it, watching it shatter just to see something reflect the mess inside my chest. But I didn't. I set it down gently, carefully, like it was still worth saving. Then came the chime. A soft, cheerful tone from my inbox. Family wedding rehearsal, RSVP closed. It was a group calendar invite, not even addressed to me directly, just sent to the family thread I hadn't spoken in for weeks. My name didn't show as invited. It was simply there, part of the background noise. My finger hovered over the screen, above the decline button, but I didn't click it. Not yet. I didn't decline. Not yet. Instead, I sat in that same chair, the one by the window where the light had started to shift into that late afternoon amber. I watched the sun pull long shadows across the floor, the kind that felt like reminders of time passing, of things that could have been said but weren't. I opened my contacts and tapped the name I hadn't called in weeks. Mom. Just 3 letters on the screen, but today they felt heavier than they had in years. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Her voice was calm, warm in that Sunday evening kind of way she used when talking about nothing and everything. Hey, sweetheart. I swallowed down what I wanted to say and settled for, Hi, Mom. Got a minute? Always, she said, but I could hear the hesitation creep in behind her words. She already knew what this was about. Is everything okay? I got a call earlier, from Dad. She didn't respond, but the silence spoke loud enough. He said I'm not invited to Callen's wedding, I continued, that Elira's family thinks I'm not a good fit for their image, and Dad agrees. Lorene exhaled. Not a sigh. Just a soft release of air, like someone setting down something fragile. It's not personal, sweetheart. It's just complicated. Complicated, I repeated. Yes, she said. You know how these things go. Families, traditions, expectations. You know your brother's always been more public-facing. He fits better in those circles. And I don't. She didn't argue. Don't stir things, Callen, she added gently. It's Callen's moment. Let him have it. Just this once. I closed my eyes. Let the phone rest against my cheek for a second before pressing the red button. She'd chosen her side. Again. Evening settled in slowly. I stayed seated, lights off, listening to the room breathe. Somewhere outside, someone was mowing their lawn even though the sun was almost gone. That low hum grounded me more than my mother's voice ever had. I opened a blank message on my phone. Typed out, It hurts more that you stayed silent than if you had said you agreed. Then I deleted it. What's the point? I stood up, stretched my legs, and walked to the kitchen to pour another cup of coffee, even though I didn't want it. I just needed something in my hands. The mug still had a hairline crack. The phone buzzed again, pulling me back. I almost ignored it, but when I checked the screen, it wasn't a call. It was a message from Asher, my cousin. Or rather, a message that wasn't meant for me. A screenshot. Group family chat. The picture loaded slowly, the text even slower. Just tell him not to come. He makes things tense. A thumbs up from Dad. A laughing emoji from Callen. No one objected. Not one. I stared at it, jaw tightening, heart rate calm but rising somewhere beneath. That was it then. I'd always known where I stood. I just never had it in writing. Now I did. I didn't call Asher, didn't respond. I just saved the image, not to send it, not to fight, just to have it. A record? Proof that it wasn't just in my head. Proof that silence could be as violent as any slap. I remembered Asher calling me 2 years ago, panicked, needing help with college tuition because his parents' savings had vanished. I wired the money the next morning. No questions asked. Apparently, being forgotten was the thanks I got. I walked back to my office and turned on the small lamp by the corner. Its light was too yellow, too warm. It made everything feel too cozy for the moment I was in. I pulled out a folder labeled Personal, found a blank page, wrote at the top, "Family Truth." I printed the screenshot and slid it in. No notes, no comments. Then I grabbed a notebook I hadn't used in months. Its cover was still crisp. I opened to the first page and wrote, "Reasons I stayed quiet." I stared at the words, then drew a single line through them. And underneath, I wrote, "Why that ends now." I left the house early. The streets were still mostly empty, coated in that strange quiet that only seems to exist just before the world wakes up. The air was crisp, not cold, just sharp enough to remind me I was still alive. I took the long way to the old family property near Traveler's Rest, letting the tires hum against the pavement, letting my thoughts roll with them. The gate creaked just like it always had, and the key still turned smoothly in the lock. Inside, the house smelled like dust and dried wood, clean but untouched. I walked past the hall of framed accolades, the room where we used to sit for Sunday dinners, and stopped in front of the study door. Dad's study hadn't been entered since the funeral. I knew that because I locked it after we cleaned out the rest of the house, and the seal I placed on the top drawer was still there, unbroken. I pushed open the door slowly, half expecting to hear the scratch of his pen or the soft thump of his boots against the hardwood. Instead, silence. Dust blanketed everything. The sunlight coming through the window painted faint patterns across his war medals, the paperweights from company anniversaries, the binders labeled by year. Nothing had been moved. I ran my hand along the edge of the desk, then paused at the top right drawer. I broke the seal and opened it. Folders, memos, a manila envelope in the back, thicker than the rest. On the front, in his handwriting, shaky but unmistakably his, it read, "To Callen, if he ever needs to remember why." I sat in his chair. The leather was cracked but familiar. I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter. It wasn't long. Dad never wasted words. "I know I've made you shoulder the storm so your brother could enjoy the calm. I let you carry more than your share because you never complained. I saw that. I saw you. They won't thank you, son, but that doesn't mean they're right." My throat didn't close. No tears came, just a steady breath, a weight I didn't realize I was holding finally shifting. I sat there for a long time, reading the letter over and over, hearing his voice in the silence, not through memory, but something closer. He hadn't been absent, just quiet. Like me. The smell of the old books and leather gave way to the scent of smoke from the backyard. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into my coat pocket. The moment was over. Time to return to the world. I followed the smell to the back lawn. The Crays were already setting up tables for the barbecue. Someone had strung fairy lights between the trees. Music played softly from a Bluetooth speaker near the patio. "Callen!" my uncle shouted, waving. "Glad you could stop by?" I nodded politely, moving through the people who didn't look me in the eye. Callen stood near the grill, a beer in hand, Elira by his side. They were laughing at something. Their son, Oliver, was bouncing beside them, full of questions and crumbs from a chocolate cookie. As I walked closer, Oliver tugged at Elira's sleeve and whispered, not as quiet as he thought, "Is he the guy setting up the chairs?" Elira smiled, glanced at me, then back to her son. "No, sweetie, that's just Uncle Cal." That was enough. I didn't correct him. I didn't speak. Callen gave me a grin, like nothing had happened. "Hey man, good to see you." I nodded. "You too." Then I turned around and walked back toward the house, past the old tree swing, past the fence line, back to where I'd parked behind the shed. By the time I reached the driver's seat, the letter still burned against my chest. The drive home was quiet again. No music, no calls. That night, I pulled a small metal lockbox from the top shelf of my closet. I placed the letter inside. I labeled it with a Sharpie, "Unspoken Legacy," and I locked it. 3 days passed, and no one reached out. Not a call, not a text. Silence has a way of stretching, becoming its own answer. That morning, I found myself in a corner cafe downtown, the kind with chipped tables and real ceramic mugs. A rain-speckled window gave me a view of passing umbrellas and cars slowing for crosswalks. I wasn't there for the coffee. I just needed neutral ground, somewhere to breathe without remembering the smell of Dad's study or the awkwardness of that backyard barbecue. I pulled out my laptop and logged into the wedding registry. I didn't know why. Maybe I wanted to torture myself. Maybe I wanted to see what else they'd erased. I clicked on the Top Gift Givers tab out of idle curiosity. There it was. The list. Names of uncles, aunts, even a few family friends. Gold badges for generous supporter next to their names. But not mine. Scrolling further, I recognized the antique oak chairs. I'd spent 2 weeks searching for the right set. Elira once mentioned wanting a farmhouse aesthetic in her future dining room. I'd remembered. Apparently, so had someone else, just not the part where I was the one who bought them. The chairs were credited to the Cray family. No mention of me. Not even a vague Callen V. Not even anonymous. I stared at the screen. That familiar warmth began crawling up my neck again. The kind that wasn't anger yet, but too sharp to be called disappointment. After paying the bill, I walked back to my car, letting the drizzle soak through the fabric of my jacket. On the drive home, I didn't bother with music. I let the static of the radio hum until it faded into white noise. When I pulled into my driveway, a small brown box sat on the porch, protected by a plastic sleeve taped hastily over the top. It was my wedding gift to Callen. I picked it up, brought it inside, and opened it at the kitchen counter. Inside, the watch, monogrammed, custom ordered, engraved on the back. For all the time we didn't spend, here's to starting now. There was no note from them, just a printed return slip tucked neatly beneath the velvet case. We appreciate your thoughtfulness but prefer not to accept high-value items. Thank you for your understanding. Understanding? I set the box down slowly, then leaned over the counter, hands bracing against the edge. My breath came in quiet, steady draws. Not ragged, not loud. Just there. This wasn't etiquette. This wasn't boundaries. This was erasure, again. I stood up, carried the box into my office, and placed it beside the file folders I'd started keeping. I opened the drawer labeled Family Incidents and created a new subfolder. Contributions, declined. I added the return slip, printed a screenshot of the registry page, found the original receipt from the watch and stapled it to the back. That folder was getting thicker, and I remembered something else. A moment buried under less weighty things. When Elira's boutique almost went under, she'd called me, voice trembling on the verge of tears. I wired the money that same evening. She cried on the phone, saying, "I'll never forget this. I mean it, Callen." Apparently, she had. I walked over to the printer and scanned the gift receipt, backing up a digital copy. Then I sat down and flipped open the folder. I pulled one page, just one, and overlaid the gift value with the registry screen. Thousands of dollars, zero recognition, zero value assigned. I whispered, "Even generosity has a breaking point," but I wasn't done. Not yet. The next morning started with drizzle tapping against the office windows and the low whir of the HVAC kicking on. It was still early, 8 a.m. on the dot, but I'd been at my desk for over an hour, nursing a mug of black coffee that had gone tepid 15 minutes ago. I was going over quarterly reports when Marla Jeans, our company accountant, pinged me on the internal chat. "Hey, got a sec? Something's off in last month's disbursement records. Need to talk. We hopped on a private video call. Her camera came on first, with her usual morning frizz and an eyebrow already arched. Marla didn't waste time with small talk. There's a string of transactions listed under community engagement, but the vendor names didn't match our usual lists, she said. They're tied to a florist, a custom invitation company, and a rental service out of Charleston. Sound familiar? I leaned back in my chair. Keep going. Well, one of the invoices flagged your digital signature, she continued. But here's the kicker. The payments were authorized during a routine approval run. Looks like someone tied those vendors into your quarterly philanthropy batch. I asked her to share her screen. She did. There it was. $18,400 listed under Decor and Cultural Ambiance. Paid to a company that had supplied Elira's wedding flowers. And this one? I pointed to another line item. Custom linens, she said. The same vendor Elira's nonprofit used for her last gala. I closed my eyes. How far back does it go? About 3 months. It's layered in small entries, likely to avoid triggering a fraud alert. I sat there, jaw tight but still. I didn't speak for a full 30 seconds. Then I said, Marla, I need you to do something. Flag all outgoing transfers tied to social engagement for now. Tell legal we're preparing for a discretionary audit. She blinked. You think it's... I think they used my signature to fund a wedding I wasn't invited to, I said flatly, and I want a clean paper trail before I even breathe near legal. Got it. I ended the call and stared at my screen, the cursor blinking at the top of a blank document. Then I opened my personal file directory. Inside, I found the folder labeled Funding Revoked. I hadn't used it since we pulled out of that community center project 4 years ago. Now, I started dragging files, vendor lists, transaction confirmations, emails forwarding donation letters that had somehow redirected to Callen's assistant's inbox. I didn't email my brother. I didn't call Elira. There was no point. Instead, I wrote a note to myself at the top of the first document. Let the truth find its own light. I forwarded a memo to our finance team. Freeze discretionary philanthropy disbursements pending review. Contact Marla for flagged entries. Subject, family-affiliated transactions. Then I opened our internal registry, our master document of significant contributors, personal beneficiaries, and discretionary gift recipients. Under my admin access, I created a private tab. Title, Contributions, Family. I typed in one entry. Wedding expenses, $42,230, funded under misrepresentation. Status, rescinded. Next to it, I stuck a virtual sticky note. They wanted me quiet. I was too generous. I leaned back in the chair, watching the rain pick up. There were no fireworks in that moment. No music cue. Just the sound of water and a rising clarity in my chest. They'd made a mistake, not in stealing from me. That part was predictable. They made the mistake of thinking I wouldn't notice. But generosity has its limits, and mine had just been reached. The email was short, cold, surgical. Subject, temporary suspension of family payroll, effective tomorrow. I sent it without a CC to the usual group, just Marla and our compliance officer. No explanation, no footnotes, just a signature and an attached document marked with the Vexley Tech legal watermark. 2 minutes later, I heard the soft chime confirming the scheduled halt had been queued in our internal system. Automatic enforcement, no warning calls, no backpedaling. They weren't just stealing money, they were spending mine, and laughing while doing it. I leaned back in my office chair and stared through the rain-smeared glass. Greenville's skyline wasn't much, but from the 6th floor, you could just see the river peeking between the brick buildings. It always made the city feel smaller, manageable. Today, that felt like an advantage. My phone buzzed with a text from Miles, a guy I went to business school with who now worked in media consulting. Dude, you seeing this? It read, followed by a link. I tapped it open. Elira's Instagram story. Final wedding countdown. Ujatsiker Cray ever after. A reel of pre-wedding highlights played. The planning, the champagne toasts, the blurred photos of family moments, and then one clip, a group photo taken at that last barbecue. I was in it, standing in the back, behind Elira and Callen barely visible. Then the clip dissolved into its final edit. I was gone. Cropped out completely. Not blurry, not faded, just gone. I stared at the screen. I didn't blink, didn't scroll. Then I opened a separate browser and pulled up an old family album, one Lorene had digitized a few years ago. Birthday parties, graduations, anniversaries. It was all there. Except, over time, I started to notice a pattern. In the early years, I was front and center. But by the time Callen's college photos started showing up, I was background, half a face here, the back of my head there. And now? Not even a shoulder. Erasure isn't always sudden. Sometimes it's gradual. A slow fade until no one remembers who was cropped out and who was never there at all. I shut the tab and walked to the printer. From my desk, I drafted an internal memo to HR. Effective immediately, all discretionary bonuses tied to family-linked project codes are to be placed on indefinite hold pending internal audit results. Contact me directly before authorizing exceptions. I printed 2 copies. One for the digital file, one for my folder. I slid it into the binder labeled Accountability, Phase 1. The act felt small but necessary, like tightening the first bolt before a demolition. I didn't need to yell. I just needed the foundation to shift beneath them. That night, long after most of the building had gone dark, I stood in front of the mirror in the executive restroom. I looked like hell. Tired. Older than I remembered. But I didn't flinch. I didn't pity the man looking back. He knew exactly what he was doing. You erased me, I said aloud, quiet and level. I'll erase your safety net. As I walked back toward my office, my phone buzzed again. A message from a junior accountant. FYI, Callen's Amex bounced at what looks like a tuxedo rental. He called asking if it's a bank issue. I smiled. I typed back, tell him it's probably a bank error. And then I shut the lights off for the night. But we both knew it wasn't the bank's mistake. Not this time. The email came through at 4:36 p.m., exactly 20 hours before Callen's wedding rehearsal. Subject: Update, Program Adjustments, Final Speaking Order. It was BCC'd. No greeting, no signature. Just a forwarded message from the wedding planner. We've shortened the speaking list per the bride's request. Thank you for understanding. I opened the attached PDF. My name was there, struck through in red, not removed quietly, not missed accidentally, struck through. I stared at the line like it was a wound reopening. I didn't reply, didn't forward it. I just closed my laptop, slid the chair back from the conference table, and stood. Later that evening, the Cray estate buzzed with rehearsed joy. Staff bustled around, hanging lanterns and tweaking table settings like they were adjusting pieces of a live theater set. Which, of course, it was. Just not for me. I showed up like they asked, like a box being checked off the logistics list. Stay visible. Stay polite. Elira spotted me near the appetizer table. She walked over, still holding a clipboard, her hair pinned into a bun too perfect to be accidental. "Oh, Callen," she said, voice too bright. "Hey, I hope you saw the updated schedule." "I did." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's not that we didn't want you to speak. We just wanted to keep it light. Too many speeches can be a drag, you know?" I nodded. "Of course. Wouldn't want the wrong tone." She smiled like she'd won something. Inside the rehearsal dinner hall, everything gleamed in golds and creams. Callen was already working the room, laughing too loud, shoulders a little too back. I stayed close to the edge, watching. I heard my name from across the room. "Did you see Callen's tux?" someone whispered. "God, that fit. Custom, right?" Another chimed in. "Must have cost a fortune. Looks sharp as hell." I glanced over. The tux fit him perfectly. Maybe a bit too perfectly. The satin trim on the lapel, the signature stitching on the cuff. It was mine. I lent it to him months ago. "Just for the fitting," he said. "Need to check the cut against the backdrop lighting." I never got it back. He was wearing it like it belonged to him, and they were complimenting him like he'd earned it. The irony didn't burn. It chilled. Later, as the staff adjusted the lighting for speeches, I wandered past the stage. On the side table sat a stack of note cards, each labeled Best Man, Marcus, Elira's Father, Welcome Toast, Callen Cray, Closing Remarks. No card for me. No placeholder. No oversight. They hadn't just silenced me. They'd made sure there wasn't even room to pretend I'd ever had a voice there. When the toast glasses were passed around, someone handed me one with a smile. I raised it, nodded, but didn't say a word. The crowd clapped anyway. They applauded silence. Because silence didn't disrupt the story they wanted to tell. I stood there and thought, you cropped my voice just like my name. The rest of the evening blurred by. Half-hearted laughter. Over-rehearsed memories. I didn't stay long after. Slipped out the side exit while everyone circled in fake sentiment. When I got home, I opened the second drawer of my writing desk and pulled out the speech I'd written months ago. Printed. Folded neatly. Untouched since the day I wrote it. I slipped it into an envelope and wrote on the front. In case they ever wonder. But I wasn't planning on letting them wonder forever. I didn't wake up with a plan to ruin anyone's wedding. That would have given them too much credit. Instead, I brewed my coffee slow, watching the clouds roll in over the distant hills. The forecast had promised sunshine, but the sky above Greenville was a muted gray, like it had second thoughts about celebrating. No one had sent me a formal invitation, not a text, not a hint. So I took a long drive out of town. Winding roads, half-empty streets, windows cracked just enough to let in the cool air, but not the noise. I pulled over at a quiet overlook. The silence there was different. Not the kind used to ignore, but the kind that listens. Then I took out my phone and made one call. "Marla," I said, "confirm freeze activation for all Cray-affiliated vendor transactions. Timestamp it, no exceptions." "Done," she replied. Her voice didn't carry judgment, just precision. I appreciated that. Meanwhile, 23 miles away at Veranda Hall, white tents were rising like sails. Gold-trimmed chairs lined the ceremony aisle. Crystal flutes gleamed. Miranda, the planner, double-checked her tablet and frowned. The second payment attempt didn't go through. She tried again. Declined. She called the venue manager aside, whispered something. Their expressions tightened. Backstage, Elira rehearsed her vowels in a silk robe. Callen adjusted his cufflinks, the ones I gave him 5 birthdays ago, now passed off as a gift from her father. At 1:42 p.m., guests began arriving. They posed under hanging lanterns, champagne in hand, while a string quartet played Vivaldi as if the music alone could hold the story together. Phones came out, hashtags spun into the air. Varelli wedding. Cray in love one guest, Noel Tapper, a freelancer known more for his TikTok vlogs than actual journalism, started filming raw BTS wedding content on his phone. No one noticed him much, until he overheard a florist whisper, Didn't this whole rose setup come from Callen's company? Another server chimed in. He's not even here, must have pulled out. Noel raised an eyebrow and kept rolling. By 2:13 p.m., things started slipping. The payment terminal froze. Miranda blinked, tried again. A red message flashed across the screen. Account suspended. Authorized freeze. She pulled Elira aside. I'm sorry, but we're being told the account's flagged. Elira blinked. What do you mean flagged? I can't process the venue's balance, or the caterer's remaining invoice. Elira looked over at Callen, who was too busy charming a group of relatives to notice. Guests started murmuring. One man glanced at his watch. Another asked, Is this delayed? In the chaos, Noel tapped out a caption. Breaking. Cravarelli wedding stalls mid-ceremony. Rumors. It was funded by the groom's estranged brother. He uploaded the clip before anyone realized what was happening. The first 20 seconds showed the wedding team rushing behind the floral arch. The rest was just faces. Confused. Shifting. Whispering. By the time I returned home, parked in my driveway and took off my shoes, the video had hit 17,000 views. And the comments? Wait, wasn't this guy funding all of it? Damn! Imagine cropping out the guy writing the checks. I didn't comment, didn't like. Just refreshed the page once and smiled. They wanted the story clean, curated, free of complexity. But stories don't freeze in perfection. They crack under pressure, especially when you pretend the architect was never there. The newspaper landed on my porch with the soft thud of a secret getting out. I let it sit there for a minute before picking it up. The front page of the Greenville Gazette, usually reserved for ribbon cuttings and high school football scores, now read, Frozen Wedding, a Family Rift? There were no names, just enough context to make the whole town fill in the blanks. I read the article twice, slowly. The quotes were vague. Sources close to the event. Unexpected delays due to financial irregularities. But anyone who knew the craze, and around here, that meant everyone, could draw a straight line between the headline and me. I folded the paper, laid it on the kitchen counter, and finished my coffee in silence. By mid-morning, I was seated at the long walnut table in the Vexley Tech boardroom, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. An emergency session had been called, not by me, but by the chairperson, who sat with her hands clasped in front of her like someone about to read a verdict. As of this morning, she began, we've voted to suspend Thaddeus Cray's honorary board position pending further review. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. An assistant quietly stepped forward and removed the plaque bearing my father's name from the wall. No ceremony, no remarks. Just 4 screws unscrewed in under 30 seconds. That afternoon, I went home. I didn't expect any calls, and none came. Not from Callen, not from Elira, not from Lorene. I reheated leftovers and sat in front of the muted TV, watching news coverage of the wedding fallout with the captions on. Words like scandal, miscommunication, and unclear affiliations scrolled across the bottom of the screen. It wasn't sadness I felt. It was distance, cold, irreversible. The next day I drove out to the Cray estate. I didn't call ahead. I didn't need to. The driveway was empty, save for a few tire tracks and a tipped-over folding chair near the hedges. I parked near the orchard, walked the gravel path, and let myself in through the side door. The house smelled like extinguished candles and sugared mimosas. Confetti still clung to the baseboards. Someone had forgotten to unplug a neon Mr. and Mrs. sign, flickering faintly in the living room window. I walked past the parlor, through the kitchen, and into the hallway that had always held our family photo wall. The frames were still there. The old ones. the ones with birthday hats and graduation gowns. And the new one, mounted center stage, the wedding rehearsal photo. Everyone smiling. Callen, Elira, Lorene, Thaddeus, and me. Sort of. My face had been covered, sloppily, casually, by a folded wedding thank you card, pinned at an angle. It wasn't even sealed, just placed. Like someone didn't care if it fell, or maybe hoped it would. I didn't touch it. I didn't move closer. I just stared, long enough to memorize the placement, the shadows, the cowardice of it. And then I turned, walked back through the same hallway, past the dining room where I once helped set the table for Thanksgiving, past the den where Callen and I built pillow forts. No one stopped me. No one knew I'd come. In the car, with the door shut behind me and the engine still cold, I exhaled once and whispered, "They built this legacy by forgetting who built the foundation." It started with a text from Jeremy, a guy I hadn't heard from in years. We were in the same dorm back in undergrad, drank the same cheap beer, crashed the same weddings. But he didn't reach out to catch up. All he wrote was, "Check the wedding video. Fast." I opened the link. The editing was flawless. Every shot airbrushed to perfection. Laughing guests, golden sunlight across Veranda Hall's lawn. Elira twirling in slow motion under floating petals. It was crafted to make envy feel earned. Then came the wide shot of the rehearsal group photo. There I was. And then, I wasn't. The frame flickered, just barely, and suddenly I was gone, replaced by negative space. A casual observer might not notice. But I did. They didn't even cut the whole scene. They kept the moment, but edited me out. I closed the laptop. I walked into my office, opened my personal hard drive, and found the raw rehearsal footage I'd recorded on my phone. Same day, same moment. I scrubbed through the timestamp, frame by frame. There I was, smiling, holding a drink, standing 2 bodies from Callen. No flicker, no glitch, just proof. I sat back in the chair, breathing through my teeth. It wasn't about one video, it was the pattern. The same way my name had been left off invitations, my donations credited to the Cray family, my face cropped out of albums. It was never loud. It was always gradual. Years of edits, years of vanishing, but I still had my voice. I turned to my laptop and opened the email draft I'd never planned to send. Its subject line read, "What I would have said." I didn't edit it. I didn't soften it. I added one sentence at the top. "If you're reading this, then you were part of the story I watched happen in silence." Then I hit send. To every family member, every wedding guest, every Vexley Tech executive who'd ever attended a Cray fundraiser. The ripple was instant. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Read receipts, generic one-liners, 2 unsubscribes from people who never spoke to me anyway. Then, one reply. It was from my cousin Ella, youngest of the Cray line. Barely 20. All she wrote was, "I always wondered why you were missing." Nothing else, no punctuation, and for some reason that hit harder than the rest. That afternoon, I walked to the small cafe near the park, sat outside with a coffee, wind grazing the sleeves of my jacket, the distant bark of dogs and kids kicking a ball across the grass. I didn't open my phone again, didn't refresh, didn't reread. Instead, I opened my draft folder, selected the original email, and deleted it. Gone. No backup, no archive. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and whispered to no one. Now you all know. It had been 5 days since I sent the email. The town wasn't silent, but it was quieter. I walked past store windows and caught glimpses of myself in the reflection. No one stopped me. No one stared. But I could feel it. The shift. The weight of knowing the truth was no longer mine alone to carry. The clouds hung low over Greenville that afternoon. I found myself in the same corner of the bookstore cafe where I'd written most of my college essays, back before I knew how heavy a name could feel, back before I understood how easy it was for a family to rewrite you in real time. I ordered my usual black coffee, no room, and sat near the window. The article had been forwarded to me by 3 different people that morning. Elira's post-wedding interview with a local magazine, glossy photos, posed smiles, and quotes that cut deeper than anything they'd ever said to my face. I skimmed until I found the line. "We're here today because we built this life from nothing, with no safety net." I didn't blink, didn't curse, just stared at those words until my eyes burned. Then I marked the timestamp and closed the tab. I remembered wiring her 20 grand when her startup nearly folded. Remembered how her voice trembled with relief, how she said, "I'll never forget this." Turns out forgetting is easier than gratitude, especially when the spotlight finally turns your way. I closed my laptop and stared out the window at people passing with tote bags and tired eyes. Somewhere in the distance, wind chimes rattled. The world didn't pause for revelations. "Callen Cray?" I turned. A man, late 30s, salt at his temples, stood a few feet away with a book in hand. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, "but are you the one who wrote that letter? The one that got shared around?" I nodded, unsure what reaction to brace for. He sat down quietly. "My name's Jared. I just wanted to say thank you." He talked for 20 minutes, about his father, about how silence replaced affection in his house, about how he was always the one who didn't make trouble until being invisible became his whole personality. "There was a line in your letter," he said, "about being edited out so gradually you almost helped them do it. That hit me." We didn't cry, didn't hug. We just talked, like 2 people picking at an old scar and finally naming the shape of it. When he left, I sat there a long time. Coffee cold, but heart a little warmer. I walked home without headphones, just the sound of my own steps on pavement. The town still buzzed around me, but I moved through it differently. Lighter. Maybe they'd never thank me. Maybe they'd never even acknowledge the things I did. But maybe I was finally done needing them to. Back at home, I opened my laptop. No distractions, no playlists, just a blank screen and a blinking cursor. Subject line: "Releasing the role I never chose." I typed out my formal resignation from all Cray-affiliated boards, funds, and projects. No anger, no footnotes, just clarity. I read it once. Then I hit send. The courthouse smelled like old paper and newly scrubbed tile, a scent of bureaucracy and endings. I stood in front of the judge, hands calm at my sides, while she scanned the final petition. She raised an eyebrow slightly. "You're aware," she said, "this waives any future rights tied to Cray family intellectual assets, name equities, and inheritance claims?" "Yes, Your Honor." "No residuals, no revisits?" "None," I said. "Let them keep the name. I'll build the legacy." The gavel dropped with a soft tap. Just like that, it was done. Walking out of the courthouse into the sharp sunlight, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. Not freedom exactly, but a lack of tether. I didn't look back. Instead, I drove past Veranda Hall on my way to the office, slowed just enough to see the side gate, the one where the guard had once told me, "Family only, sir," as if the bloodline that funded their buffet somehow forgot its source. I didn't stop. Didn't need to anymore. By noon, Vexlitech's public announcement had gone live. Press wires buzzed, my inbox filled. The Callen Vexley Initiative had been established, a $2.5 million seed fund for youth entrepreneurship and caregivers who, like me, built without applause, No Cray signatures, no Cray mentions, just mine. A podcast called Within 20 Minutes. An education reporter wanted to do a cover feature. My assistant forwarded a clip of a local news anchor calling it the most quietly impactful gesture of the decade. But what stayed with me most was the little girl at the ribbon cutting that afternoon. 8, maybe 9, hair in braids, eyes sharp with curiosity. She looked up at me and said, "I want to build something too, like you did." No craze showed. Not one. But the mayor spoke. So did the school principal. And that little girl, she made it matter. That night, back at home, I sat at my desk and pulled out a letter I'd started weeks ago. One page addressed to Callen, Elira, Lorene, and Thaddeus. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was just the truth. But I didn't send it. I slid it through the shredder, fed each piece into the fireplace, watched the edges curl and vanish into ash. "They wouldn't read it," I whispered. "They never did before." Then I picked up my phone, opened the old family group chat, the one that used to ping every Sunday with passive-aggressive reminders and birthday gifts. I hovered for a second, then hit delete. No fanfare, no final words. Just clarity. "You had the wedding," I murmured to the empty room, "but I built the future." And this time, the guest list had only one name that mattered. Mine. Some people inherit a name, others build one. Looking back, I spent years trying to earn my place in a family that quietly taught me I was optional. But the truth is, your worth doesn't live in their invitations, their photos, or their applause. It lives in the life you build when no one's watching. What they erased, I redefined. If you've ever felt overlooked, outcast, or quietly replaced, let me tell you this. You don't need their seat at the table to set your own. You don't need permission to leave. You don't need closure to begin again. So here's what I've learned. Let them crop you out. Let them forget your name. Just make sure they remember your legacy. What about you? Have you ever been the silent builder in a loud family? Have you ever let go of something, not out of anger, but out of love for yourself? If this story struck a nerve, if you've ever felt like the invisible one, drop a 1 in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to hear your story too. And hey, if this video meant something to you, don't forget to hit subscribe. We've got more stories coming that just might feel a little too close to home. In the best way.